All right, so Seller, aka Riyadh Season, aka Turki Alalshikh, sorry, His Excellency Turki Alalshikh, announced a deal with the TKO Group, aka Dana White, to create a brand new boxing league, and they are vowing to revolutionize the sport of boxing. So let's talk about it before we do. My name's Rahul J. Chan, this is The Battle Camp. Thank you very much for joining me. If you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing. So look, man, obviously the deal got announced a few days ago, and I've just been kind of pondering on what this might mean for the sport of boxing. And over the last few days, obviously I've watched a lot of reaction from the usual suspects when it comes to combat sports media, and you've got a whole array of opinions of what we should expect as fans, right? So on one end of the spectrum, you've got people like Paulie Malignaggi and Ara Helwani who have a negative outlook on this, and they think it might be a bad day for boxing when this got announced a couple of days ago. They have the reservations about Dana White, about the UFC, and boxing fitting in to the UFC model. Now, it has to be said, both of these guys have history with Dana White, so it wouldn't be a far stretch if their opinions are being shaded by their own relationships with the UFC and Dana White, right? And by the same token, on the other end of the spectrum, can't get my words out today, I watched a video from the Fight Disciples, and they were just like, they were beside themselves with excitement. They were of the belief that this is the shot in the arm that boxing needed. We don't need these sanctioning bodies, and this is great, and Uncle Dana's here to save the day, blah, blah, blah. And again, to me, I've never really heard or seen them say anything negative about the UFC and Dana White. And let's call a spade a spade. They're reliant on access to Dana White. They're reliant on keeping in the good graces of the UFC. So I don't blame them. I don't blame them for being so positive. And maybe they've just had a positive experience with the UFC, so that's why they're happy about this news. Just a side note, like Adam Cattrall, one of the Fight Disciples, he was so kind of dismissive of the Conor Benn Chris Eubank Jr. fight, and the fact that there's a rehydration clause in Chris Eubank Jr.'s contract. Like, I saw a couple of videos of him on TalkSport arguing the case, talking about how there should not be a rehydration clause, and it's a joke, blah, blah, blah. And at the same time, I've never seen him once talk about the lawsuit that the UFC, ex-UFC fighters and existing UFC fighters were in with the UFC regarding fighter pay and being treated fairly. So that's just a spider, but I don't even know why I brought that up. But that's just, I suppose, an example of why I'm saying what I've just said. When I started thinking about this, I was a bit like, how's it going to work? Because when the UFC started, might be the wrong word. When the UFC grew into what it is today, the sport was so young, so it was easier for them to maneuver and manipulate and tie fighters down to exclusive contracts, etc. And I can see the pathway that they took to get to where they are now, right? That's not the case in boxing. You already have sanctioning bodies. You've already got commissions like the British Boxing Board of Control. You've already got promoters that have deals with fighters. So how are they going to kind of maneuver this so they're the number one league in town? There's already a framework. There's already an infrastructure in place, right? So then I was thinking, like, because also Turkey, like, over the last 2 years or 18 months, however long he's been involved in the sport, he's pretty much had it his own way anyway. He's pretty much been able to make whichever fight he wants to make whenever he wants to make it. He's been able to get all of these guys to fight in Saudi Arabia, which isn't obviously a historic fight destination. So I was just thinking, like, what are his motivations for this? And the kind of a couple of points that I could come up with in my head is, one, he probably was sick and tired of dealing with all of the sanctioning boards, all of the different organizations that own and hold the world championships for each of the weight classes. He's probably sick and tired of mandatories being inserted into pictures of him wanting to make fights between fighter A and fighter B, but hold on, fighter A's got a mandatory and he's not really a big name in the sport, that sort of thing. And then that obviously explains why he went out and bought the Ring magazine, because with the magazine comes the belt. right? And that ring belt comes with credibility. Like a lot of fighters, when they win the ring belt, they're excited about the fact that they're the ring champion, because a ring belt is always contested against the number 1 and number 2 ranked fighters in that division based off of Ring's rankings. And Ring's rankings aren't like the UFC's rankings. There's always a lot of credibility around that, right? But that doesn't explain the TKO side of things, because he already had the ring belt. He already had the Ring magazine. He could have just started to promote events for that belt. Why does he need the UFC and the WWE, the TKO group on board? To me, it's just he's gone out and got the best in class, basically. Because what are the two things that Turkey cares about? He cares about good events, a good experience for the fans, the whole kind of logistics and the staging of events. He cares about that, and he cares about just the glitz and glam. Remember when Riyadh season first started and those first few events, Turki Alalshikh was getting rappers, I think Usher, there was random people that would come and perform. The stages were all amazing. The promos during fight announcements were like bloody movie trailers and stuff like that. And you've got the UFC, who are the best in the world at putting on combat sport events. And you've got the WWE, who are the best at putting on a show. And behind all of that, you've got some very, very intelligent men who are able to make big deals worth a lot of money with broadcasters and sponsors. So he's just gone out and said, right, I want you, and I'm going to create the dream team to make a boxing league, because I want this to be the biggest thing in the world, right? Now, with everything that I've just said, it kind of sounds like what's there to be negative about? Like, there's a man who's just come along and he's plowing tens of millions of dollars into the sport. Fighters are happy, promoters are happy, fans are happy, and now he wants to create a league to take it up a notch. Surely there should be nothing to be concerned about, right? But in my mind, it all depends. It all depends on what the TKO group's remit is in all of this. Because if it's literally just, here's a pot of money and I want you to go out and create the best experience for fighters and the fans possible, then I can't see any negatives in it. If the remit is to maximize revenue, use your existing infrastructure, the code, what's the way of saying this? Use your existing infrastructure to put on the events, and I want you guys to turn boxing into UFC and this TKO organization, whether they're going to call it Ring, I don't know what they're going to call it, but I want boxing to be exactly like UFC. Then the stuff that Paulie Malignaggi and Ariel Helwani were saying, there could be some credence to it. It's just, we don't know, innit? We don't know at this stage what we're signing up for. But I think, I'm sorry, I had to pause it there for a second. But I think once it comes to light what the remit of the TKO group is, then we'll know what we have in store. Like, it's important to note, a lot of the boxers that they're going to be going for to be on these events obviously not only have existing deals with promoters, they have a sense of loyalty towards these promoters as well. And if they're going to try and tie boxers down to exclusive deals and you can only fight on these ring shows and you have to leave your promoter, then it will be decades, like years and years and years, until we have boxing in the same situation, or we have a boxing league that mirrors the UFC, right? There are some like potential concerns with all of this as well. This is, to me, it seems like this is Turki Alalshikh's pet project. He's a fan of boxing. And what happens if he retires? What happens if he falls out with the powers that be in Saudi Arabia and he's restricted? What happens if he's no longer with us. It's a horrible thing to say, but is there a plan in place for that? Like, is there anyone else within the kingdom that cares about boxing the way Turkey cares about boxing? Like, the day that he goes, will they look at the books and say, why are we just wasting tens of millions of dollars every year on this boxing stuff and it's bringing us no benefit? Get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. What happens when the sugar daddy leaves, gets upset and goes? What happens if Turkey, not just Turkey, the Saudi Arabia, whatever they call, Riyadh season seller, see the value that TKO are bringing to the table, and they see all of the revenue that they're bringing in, and they see all of the things that they're doing behind the scenes, and it shifts from, this is a tool for Saudi Arabia to bring boxing to their own youth and show Saudi Arabia in a good light across the world, and it changes into a actual business that is turning a profit, and that is the main goal of the business. At that point, and if TKO's influence is growing and growing and growing, what happens then? Does it turn more into the UFC? And if it does, is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't know. Will it have a everlasting impact on promoters within the sport? Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, Oscar De La Hoya. Does this cause a massive cause for concern for those guys? I shouldn't have said cause twice in a sentence, so close together. How amateur. But do you get what I'm trying to say? Like, how is this going to impact the promoters that are already, the established promoters that are already in the game, that already have deals with broadcasters like Queensberry and Matchroom? Both have multi-fight deals for multiple years with DAZN, obviously probably worth tens of millions of pounds. Like, how will this impact them? So there's a lot to consider. Personally, in my opinion, this has made me kind of sit up and take more notice of boxing. I'm very aware that I might be in the minority when I say this, but my interest in the sport of boxing grew during the YouTube era, and I started hearing more from fighters and promoters, and I started understanding the politics in the sport and the beef between fighters and promoters. And I used to I still do, I used to look forward to interviews and hearing from people and hearing opinions about why Deontay Wilder is refusing to fight Anthony Joshua, or why Joshua hasn't fought Tyson Fury, or why Kell Brook and Amir Khan haven't fought each other. Whose fault is it? Who's ducking who? And since Turkey's come in, that has died down quite a bit. You've got Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, they're best mates. They couldn't stand the sight of each other just 3 years ago. And I miss that, man. I miss the beef. And one thing that I'm really, really, really looking forward to is seeing how the established boxing promoters interact with Dana White. Will Dana White come in and swing his dick around effectively and try and show everyone that he's boss? When let's be frank, like, he's obviously he's achieved a lot in the sport of MMA, but when it comes to boxing, he's got a lot to learn and he hasn't got a lot of time to do it. And if he comes into the sport with the attitude that he has in MMA, we're going to see a lot of fireworks. And that's really what I've got to say. And I've spent 14 minutes now basically saying none of us really know what's going to happen. But I'll tell you what, interesting times ahead. Let me know what you guys think. Put your comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, share it with a friend. Subscribe to the channel. If you haven't enjoyed the video, subscribe anyway so you can hate on me. Write hateful comments every time I post. And I'll catch you guys next time.